All right. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, everybody.
It's just Danielle and I today. We're going to do a deep dive on all things fiber and excited to chat about it. Fiber and gut bacteria, microbiome. Yeah, excited to chat about it.
Yeah, because we just can't stop talking about it. But before we dive in, Ashley, I thought I would bring up something I heard on the radio in the past week. I guess a listener wrote into the radio people and said like they were going for their first ever colonoscopy and they wanted to know what to write on their bottom as a note to the doctor when they had their scope. And I was so shocked to hear that kind of remark. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, one, have you ever heard that? And two, have you ever left a note for the doctor?
No, but I have heard of people like putting jokes or stuff right down there.
I'm supposed to see my GI in like 2 weeks. So I'm going to ask him if he's ever had a note before.
Yeah, I have thought about it.
I might next time, but I don't know. It's kind of like an interesting thing to do.
I guess if you're on good terms with your GI, right, and you can handle it.
Right.
But
It may like help my anxiety in that moment too. So yeah, we'll see.
yeah.
Game time decision.
Do you get anxiety with colonoscopies and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I feel like more so because it's like, what are they going to find out? Always the unknown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because when I've had scopes before, they've been quite painful. And here in Nova Scotia, you don't get completely knocked out. So well, I feel like drugs work better for some people, but I'm completely awake during the process. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that they kind of kept you more in a in and out state in Canada.
Yeah,
Or
I think it depends on the province.
yeah.
But yeah, and I don't know if like my anxiety is like, nope, these drugs won't work on you because you gotta like fight.
Oh, yes.
But
I mean, if you listen to previous episodes a year or two ago, I talked about some of my experience with colonoscopies, and you really can fight it off if you want to. I've had some really bad anxiety around colonoscopies before where I am just fighting it off, like just trying to resist it. And the last one I had, it wasn't like that, but I've sort of settled into the idea of it's okay, especially when you have to do them frequently like we do. Eventually you kind of get to a safer place with it. I mean, it took me a lot of therapy to get through my own anxieties about that, but
yeah. And I feel like for me too, it's a mix of like one, like a little bit of anxiety, and two, this is cool. I want to see the inside of my intestines.
oh yeah.
Like watching the screen. I remember my last scope, like, just bugging my doctor. Oh, what's that? Like, why is it bleeding right now? Or like, what's going on? So yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I stayed awake for my first one, completely awake. Like, no anesthesia.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah,
Did you have any medication?
yeah, they required me to do like tramadol, but the first one I really wanted to see. I really wanted to see what it looked like, and I think here in the States they definitely look at you like you're a little crazy if you want to do something like that. But now I probably wouldn't do that now. But yeah, it was fascinating to be able to watch, and it's very quick. Like you think of it as I built it up to be a little longer than it was, but it's like real quick generally, unless they're finding something or dilating or whatever.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, just fun stuff about scopes today.
Yeah, I have one coming up.
Oh, you do?
I do in October.
Okay, so still some time, but it's in the future for sure.
Yes. So excited to get a little update. I mean, I've been feeling really great, but other than some joint pain here or there, excited to kind of you never really know how you're doing until they take a look. So
It's true. True. So a good little deep dive check-in on things.
yeah. Yeah. So let's dive into fiber, something we talk about all the time on here.
Can't get enough of it because we always want people to know the truth around fiber, ways that we can reduce our fears around fiber and why it's so dang important.
Yeah. So if you are somebody who has been curious about it or wanting to know a little deeper than just like, hey, fiber is important, in this episode, we'll try to get a little bit deeper as to what's actually going on and why we recommend the things we do and why we don't recommend carnivore.
Yeah.
Word of caution.
Absolutely. Yes. So today we have 5 key points we're going to touch on when it comes to fiber and why we want to include it in nutrition therapy for IBD. One of the biggest reasons is to help regulate bowel movements. So whether that is someone who's struggling with diarrhea or someone who's struggling with constipation or kind of like a mix in between, fiber can play a big role in helping to improve bowel movements. And why is that? Well, I mean, fiber, we generally have the 2 different types, soluble fibers and insoluble fibers. We want a good mix of both of them, but they both have 2 unique characteristics that can help with bowel movement. So, for example, when we're thinking about soluble fibers, that can be something that can be helpful for decreasing diarrhea. Soluble fibers are found in things like oatmeal, potatoes, rice, fruits without the skin. So think of like banana or like an applesauce or peeled apples and avocado, hummus, beans, that kind of stuff. So all of that can help draw more water into the bowel to help decrease incidence of diarrhea for people. All right. So those are some things to consider. If someone is constipated, we may suggest including more insoluble sources of fiber that help push things along the digestive tract and helps kind of like act as a broom to like sweep things along. So sources of insoluble fiber are nuts and seeds, your lovely leafy greens, what you would think of more as like roughage. So the skins of fruits and vegetables, like cucumber skins or just cucumber in general, and cauliflower, broccoli, those sorts of things. And of course, too, we want to get a good balance of both so that we can have that lovely Bristol for as much as we can, which is kind of that ideal stool for majority of the population.
I think a lot of people are surprised by the first one because we're confronting this myth around IBD that you can't have any fiber. That's kind of the narrative, especially if you're coming out of the hospital, you're given a handout that's like go low residue and often aren't told like, hey, this is not really forever. This is just for like a temporary symptom management sort of thing. And so I think people are often surprised, at least when I'm talking about fiber, that we can actually use fiber therapeutically to reduce symptoms, to help with inflammation reduction, to improve IBD overall. I think that's a big one that, a lot of people are surprised about. And if you are curious about that in particular, we have a great ebook that Danielle and I created on fiber on our website. So definitely check that out. So that brings us to number 2, improving. So fiber helps to improve the gut barrier function. So what do we mean by that? So number 1, the gut barrier, we want to be intact and healthy looking because it protects. The gut barrier actually protects what we call the GALT, the gut associated lymphatic tissue, which is where a good amount of our immune system resides. And so we have mucosal layers that protect the GALT in the gut barrier. So we want it to be nice and connected. We don't want it to start getting disconnected or have, less mucosal present. So certain types of fiber, like soluble fibers, they're fermented by our gut bacteria, and they help produce something called short chain fatty acids, like butyrate, for example. Butyrate's the one we'll often see talked about in research if you were to kind of look into this further. So short chain fatty acids do a number of different things for protecting the integrity of your gut lining. It's a major fuel source to the gut lining. So butyrate acts as a fuel source to help repair the gut barrier. And oftentimes it can be compromised in IBD. So you can have changes to the gut barrier, which can we think can, lead down the path of encouraging more disrupted gut microbiome and leading to kind of more of this inflammation and higher intestinal permeability overall. So that is one of the roles of fiber, is to produce butyrate, which is one of the goals of nutrition therapy, is to help create more of these things, because we know they play such a key role in helping us keep a healthy microbiome and a healthy gut barrier. Now, if we were to kind of envision what this looks like, you can imagine like the gut barrier is fairly thin. So we have, it's like a cell or two thick, I believe. I think it's a cell thick, which is thin. So actually above that, we have two different layers we have your inner mucosal layer and your outer mucosal layer. And the mucosal layer plays this key role too in protecting us. So your mucosal layer actually secretes certain compounds to repel some of the gut bacteria that we don't want to be there. So more disruptive gut bacteria, and attract some of the gut bacteria that we do want to be present. So the more helpful stuff. So that's what that mucosal layer does. It's protective in nature. Our body is doing the best it can to protect our immune system and to protect us. One of the challenges if you have a fiber restricted diet is that, so we'll try to put a picture somewhere in the notes here, but when you have fiber present, it gives your helpful gut bacteria something to consume. And when they consume that fiber, they produce your short chain fatty acids or butyrate. If they don't have a fuel source, one of the things that can happen is it can consume the mucosa. And we don't want that to happen, because that can expose more of the gut barrier, and that's where we can have more damage occur. So more disruption to that. So if we were to kind of boil it down to why we need fiber present in the diet in some shape or form, that's one big reason, and how it helps this overall picture of helping IBD is just kind of imagine what I was just describing. So that's kind of a visual as to why we want fiber present.
We don't want anything eating away at the intestines.
No, yeah, definitely not our mucosal layer for sure.
Yeah. The third little point that is helpful when including fiber in the diet is that it helps to reduce inflammation. And it does this through what Ashley chatted about was important in the short chain fatty acids that are produced when fiber is fermented. And one of those big ones is called butyrate. It can have an anti-inflammatory effect on the gut and really the entire body. Short chain fatty acids can help to modulate the immune response and reduce the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. And all those big words simply mean that when fiber is fermented, it produces butyrate to help bring down inflammation and to help slow down things that may produce more inflammation in the gut. And because, of course, IBD is an inflammatory condition, we want to make sure that we're consuming enough fiber to ensure this process continues. Ashley, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, actually, so I did want to mention with butyrate, there's a long list of things that it can be helpful for, including stuff you wouldn't normally think about, like blood sugar regulation balance, even helping with triglyceride balance. And so there's that end of things. There's also, like Danielle said, it can be helpful in reducing inflammation, not just within the gut, but we're talking more systemic inflammation reduction. So throughout your entire body, which is pretty big deal. And then helping to repair the digestive tract, helping to also reduce the risk of cancer, which is something we always want to think about too. What can we do to prevent? When you think about colon cancer, one of the big things people push is fiber for that reason, because of butyrate production. And the key balancing aspect of butyrate is it helps decrease harmful gut bacteria that are often correlated with flare-ups. So there's a number of gut bacteria that are correlated with more flare-ups. E. coli, for example, is typically found at the site of ulcerations and ulcerative colitis. But yeah, not to get too detailed into that, we want to keep a healthy gut microbiome, and butyrate is a key player in helping us do that.
And like a big part of this too is knowing that there's definitely way more than one type of short chain fatty acid. Just butyrate is that heavy hitter when it comes to gut health and IBD, but there's a whole bunch of other ones that can have a big role in one's overall health. So even when we're talking about fiber and gut health, like fiber does so many other great things for us. And I think Ashley mentioned a few of those, but yeah, blood sugar regulation is a big one, helping you feel full for longer, to feel satisfied in your day. And I mean, obviously, of course, you get lovely nutrients and enjoyment from these fibrous foods too. At least that's always the hope, one of the goals that I like to work on with people, get enjoyment of food again too.
Yeah. So number 4 is that it helps with creating a healthy and diverse gut microbiome, like we were previously talking about. So it kind of helps create that balance. It helps create an appropriate pH level within the luminal colon. So when I say pH, I'm not talking about the way people talk about pH online or in marketing, not talking about pH of water or anything, but the actual, just the balance, the overall balance to kind of keep a healthy gut microbiome and keep some of those helpful gut bacteria present overall for the long haul. Yeah, so that brings us to number 5. Fiber helps with reducing the risk of flare-ups. So we know that those that don't restrict fiber are actually 40% less likely to have flare-ups. So we know fiber plays a key role in helping to prevent and helping to create an environment where flare-ups are less likely to happen. And that's the overall goal that we have when we look at nutrition for IBD.
And other goals that are important to keep in mind as well is about getting variety in your diet to help improve your gut microbiome. And why is that? Well, because in IBD, one of the big features of it is the fact that there's often an imbalance of gut bacteria, or what's called a gut dysbiosis. And we can improve gut dysbiosis by getting more of that beneficial bacteria and less of the bad bacteria through what we eat. Medications can also help with this as well, as in they help to repair the gut lining. But, knowing all of this, where do we go next with this information, and what bacteria do we want more of? And we're going to definitely talk about that next, both through foods and fiber supplements. So what should we talk about first?
Yeah, so absolutely nothing can replace dietary intervention. So getting lots of color in the diet, getting lots of different types of fibers is really important when it comes to IBD. Sometimes, on occasion, we may want to also use a prebiotic fiber supplement as a way of really having a specific dose and a strategy in place for whatever symptoms someone's dealing with. So if we're wanting to decrease diarrhea in a more specific key way, sometimes we might use a prebiotic fiber supplement to help do that. So definitely not in place of dietary strategies, because we still want those to be present, but as an additional way. So some reasons we might use that would be if someone's having a difficult time adding in more food because their symptoms are really high, and we want to just really decrease some of their symptoms so that they can expand their diet. One way we can do that is through using, certain prebiotic fiber supplements to help do that, to get people to a more stable place, to maybe where they can expand their diet a little bit. So sometimes we might do something like that so that we can get to the overall picture of adding more to the diet. Or there might be other reasons too, like in the case of strictures or in the case of just different challenges that people encounter with IBD, where adding in, fiber-rich foods might be a challenge too. So we might want to go with like a completely soluble fiber that can help do some of that work without putting someone at risk for, any kind of obstruction or other challenges that can pop up like that. So that's kind of the reason sometimes we might use additional support alongside what we're doing in the diet. So I want to mention kind of the top ones that we'll often use for when we're working with people like this. And then we'll also kind of after that jump into what gut bacteria are present and what modifications we know can actually help with increasing or decreasing those gut bacteria. The number one thing that we recommend most often is Sunfiber or partially hydrolyzed gar gum. So you might have heard of gar beans or gar gum, which is a little bit different than partially hydrolyzed gar gum. It is different in the way that it's modified. Gar gum is essentially just a bean. So it's a bean that acts as a stabilizer. And sometimes people have a little fear around them because they can cause a little bit of bloating. But when you alter gar gum and make partially hydrolyzed gar gum or Sunfiber, we know it can have some great benefits for the overall ecosystem and helping to dial back constipation, diarrhea, help with short chain fatty acid production. So there's a lot of great benefits with it. And we often use it as a strategy in our practice because it does so many things and because it can mix in very easily with coffees or teas, or it's easy to take, which is another big reason we might lean towards this one versus others.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say probably the next one that we're more often to recommend as well is the psyllium seed powder, not to be confused with psyllium husk. So psyllium seed powder, where everything is ground up nice and great. And this type of fiber supplement can help with excess moisture. So if you're having a lot of diarrhea, it can help decrease that. And it also promotes butyrate production. This type of fiber comes from a plant. It's called the Plantago ovata seed. Did I say that right, Ashley?
Yeah.
Plantago ovata.
So.
It's a fun one to say. And yeah, like I said, it can help with that additional source of butyrate production, which again can help decrease inflammation in the long run. And because it can help with diarrhea, that means it is a more of a soluble fiber, or it is a soluble fiber. It helps to gel in the gut, and this slows down digestion. So it also helps to support and nourish the microbiome and gut lining and produce that lovely gut bacteria that we want to see, or that positive gut bacteria.
So I guess going back to Sunfiber. So Sunfiber, I'm such a big fan of it that I ended up creating my own. So I created a Sunfiber that also contains a specific probiotic strain that can be helpful in reducing bloat and abdominal pain. Very effective at that. And so I combined the two because I had seen such good, when we do track our results within our practice, and we look for key things that make the biggest difference so that we can better help people and get right to the core of like what really matters, what's really going to help ultimately. And so one of the things that I found over time, and this has also been studied, but there's what we read in studies, and then there's what we actually see when we're using it and how we use it and the combinations of things we use. And one of the things that we've seen is big improvements with using Sunfiber, especially alongside this probiotic strain that can be helpful. We use it in cases where there's constipation. We use it in cases where it's diarrhea. It's one of those, the only prebiotic fiber that I know of that can help with both. So it's a regulating fiber, can help with both realms. So especially if you're someone who fluctuates between the two, such a great option, especially because the other option that I think the conventional route of treating alternating constipation and diarrhea is to kind of people will suggest Miralax or Linzess, and you kind of go back and forth between treating one or the other, versus when you can use something like this, you can cover both grounds and also encourage the growth of bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, which we want to be higher in the gut with people who have IBD. So lots of great benefits. Can help with reducing diarrhea by 82% is the stats. And this is not immediate. So this is looking at 6 weeks in or more. You might notice it sooner, but one key thing with Sunfiber that I've noticed is that people will often stop too soon. So they'll stop a couple of days into taking it, when really you have to give it a little bit of time, because the first couple of days, for some people, it can be uncomfortable. Some people do notice more gurgling. Some people do notice a little bit of gas. But after that, you start to adjust and you generally do much better. So sometimes it's a better idea to kind of start slow and build up over time. But yeah, the dosage is generally, we might do around 5 to 10 grams per day. It depends on where someone's starting from too. If they're starting from a very, very limited diet, we might start with an even smaller dose and build up over time. And, one other thing that we see with using it is improvements in IBS symptoms, so decreasing in bloating, abdominal pain, gas, and abdominal spasms. But again, that's at several weeks of taking it, so it can take a little bit of time to build up symptom relief like that. So lots of good benefits with using Sunfiber, especially in combination with the probiotic strain. And I guess I'll jump in and talk about that for an example. The strain that we use in ours, which we have one called Back to Balance Plus, and it contains a probiotic strain called Lactobacillus plantarum, and the strain name is 299V. So this 299V strain has some really good benefits for reducing bloating and abdominal pain at around the 4-week mark. So the study that they've done on this particular strain, 4 weeks of treatment, the strain helped to reduce painful IBS symptoms like bloating and abdominal pain in 78% of the individuals that took it. When you look at how much it actually improved it, it was around 60% reduction in abdominal pain and bloating. And I've definitely seen in our practice some huge benefits with people, because the thing is with IBD, many of us, and it varies whether you have Crohn's or UC as to what percentage that is, but many people with IBD will also have IBS-like symptoms. So their disease might be in a good spot and they can still be symptomatic. And so this is one of the reasons why I really like using this particular strain, because it has such great benefit at reducing some of the pain that we notice in IBD. And the pain is generally more related to IBS type stuff than it is to inflammation or IBD. So yeah, so that's the combination that we have and one that we recommend most often. But on occasion, we'll also look at, using things like psyllium seed or psyllium husk, depending on what it is someone's dealing with. But do you want to jump into psyllium husk, for example?
Psyllium husk, yes. So psyllium husk is, again, from that fun little plant, the Plantago ovata seed. It's that outer coating of it. So it's very rich in soluble fiber and has similar benefits to the psyllium seed powder that I mentioned before. It's commonly in Metamucil as well.
But one of the things with Metamucil is that I'm not crazy about is there's a lot of additives that can be gut irritants in it. Mm-hmm. So if you want the key ingredient without having to take that, it's essentially psyllium husk, so.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone was wondering, that is the key component of Metamucil, but there's also the more simplified version of psyllium husk. This as well has been shown to improve stool consistency and can help reduce inflammation by increasing more of those short-chain fatty acids we talked about. One thing I will note too with the psyllium husk, it's something that most people kind of like choke back, if you will. It's something that gels really well. It doesn't dissolve completely like PHGG does. So because of that, it's not something we would recommend for someone who has stricturing disease. So just take note of that. But like I said, there is great evidence to show that 5 to 10 grams per day, depending on the person and their state of symptoms and disease, can do really well with psyllium husk. To talk more so about the studies, there was some studies that found that people with inactive colitis felt better when they ate psyllium husk or seed. In first study, people took psyllium husk for 4 months. So not an instant thing, but this 4-month study, they had less stomach pain, less diarrhea, and less other tummy troubles.
So I think what we'll do at this point, I think we should do a part 2. There is so much that we want to cover today, but we've kind of just scratched the surface. So just wanted to share a little bit about different fibers that we'll often use. And yeah, join us for part 2 and we'll do a deeper dive into discussing the gut bacteria that we want to be present for best case scenario, and kind of do a deeper dive on the research on PHGG, psyllium seed powder, and psyllium husk. All right, until next time, take care.
Bye, everybody.